Hello and welcome to
Real English
with
Real Teachers.
real teachers.
British English, or the English in general, is the reason that we're doing today's episode. A lot of my students have to go through a grueling experience, sometimes grueling, like quite bad, quite hard, quite difficult, with the idea of doing test preparation and getting the mark that they want for a test of the English language that they are able to speak for various reasons. And we have a guest on the show to help us overcome these fears or better understand the preparation behind some of these exams. So we have Josh McPherson, an American English teacher who focuses predominantly on the TOEFL test preparation. So TOEFL is the test of English as a foreign language, and it's a standardized test to measure the English language ability of non-native speakers wishing to enroll in English-speaking universities, and also probably with visas and job applications. So the test is accepted worldwide. It's a massive one. If you've heard of the IELTS exam, it's similar to that. Yeah, Josh has an online-based language test solution platform to help English language learners achieve the results that they're wanting to get. So that's what we're going to be talking about, the TOEFL exam, and comparing it also to this new kid on the block, the Duolingo test, because people are getting interested in whether this is a competitor, what are the pros and cons of it. We'll be talking about the differences between those two. Josh was the academic coordinator for an ELT program in Manhattan for student visa holders. So we've got a lot to get through, and it's a culture-based podcast, isn't it? As Josh, I believe, is a human, he probably has some cultural experiences to share with us. And I think he does because he's also married a Japanese woman, and they live in Kyoto, Japan right now with 3 kids. And they've been there for about 4 years. So we've got lots to get through. Welcome, Josh, to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Charlie. I appreciate it. And thank you for clarifying that I'm a human. I had to make that clear to people. But yeah, your introduction was perfect. Thank you. And you explained TOEFL better than I can, actually. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, it was a Google translation, or just Google. Yeah. So I'm the robot today, really. But yeah, so Josh, you're from America. Whereabouts in America?
I'm from New York, from Long Island, more particularly, and which is kind of close to Queens. So I grew up in a town called Valley Stream. Grew up there, didn't know a lot about the world, really. Just kind of my own little world of New York and have my own culture. Got into English language teaching after college, went to Korea, got my degree in TESOL. And then I was, as you mentioned, I was the coordinator of a program in New York. That's where I started teaching TOEFL, and then just bouncing around teaching English. And now I'm in Japan, like you said. Your introduction was perfect, man. I couldn't have done it better.
Fantastic. Yeah, interesting though. So I have a lot of questions, but I need to be quite specific because we don't have 3 hours, unfortunately. I'd like to get to the point where, they're going as long as Joe Rogan's podcast, 3 hours long. Crying,
I don't know how he talks for that long.
I know.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm up for it. Maybe we'll see how far this goes today. We'll see if my stamina's up for it.
So let's get into the test stuff, and then maybe talk about culture in your life a little bit later. The TOEFL exam is what you've focused on predominantly recently. And there's a new one, the Duolingo test. Can you explain a little bit about the differences between those two?
Sure, yeah. So, we've been focused on TOEFL. TST Prep is the business I run, and we've been focused on TOEFL Prep, and our YouTube channel is mostly TOEFL Prep, but we're going to get into Duolingo. And basically what happened is in the last year, there's a lockdown because of COVID, as everybody knows. And a lot of students needed to take English tests like IELTS or TOEFL, but they couldn't because at first, there weren't a lot of online solutions. Later, TOEFL and IELTS you were able to take them online. I think IELTS too, but TOEFL you can take online now. But at first you couldn't. And so a lot of schools and universities turned to the Duolingo English test. Then in the last year, this test has exploded in popularity. I think it's gone from less than 1,000 schools that accept it to over 16,000 in the last year. The test itself accounts for 20% of Duolingo's revenue as of this year.
Wow.
So it's become a massive phenomenon. It has its pros and cons. It has some critics as well. But in my opinion, it's a lot easier for the students, a lot friendlier for the students. But some people feel that it's not great for preparing somebody for university. So there's some debate about how good it is. Just to give you an example, you don't have to write an essay for Duolingo English test. The most you have to write.
So Duolingo, from what I understand, is the basic app of learning the beginnings of a language. Have they gone beyond that now?
So Duolingo, you could go from beginning to advanced, but their specialty is kind of like, and their philosophy is that language education for everybody, pretty much. That it's a free app. You can pay for it, but it's mostly free to learn languages. About 5 years ago, they made this Duolingo English test, but it never really picked up much steam. It never became very popular. And mostly because TOEFL and IELTS were so well established, some people didn't think the Duolingo English test really fit the requirements needed for an English test to check if you're ready for university. It wasn't used. So it's been sitting there on the shelf, so to speak, but it wasn't so popular. Traditionally, that's what they do. They do language learning, bunch of languages. You can even learn, fake languages like Klingon or made up languages, or Valerian, like Game of Thrones. So they have a lot of things on Duolingo, but now they have an English test that's become very, very popular.
We rudely interrupt your viewing experience because you absolutely have to get our brand new free ebook and audiobook that will help anyone dramatically improve their IELTS speaking score. Click the link in the top right corner of the screen now, or find it in the description box below. Back to your viewing experience in 3, 2, 1. So you don't have an essay. I assume you have audio recordings that they then analyze. Do they analyze it automatically, or are there people behind it?
So that's the other thing that's a little that people are critiquing, that there are human reviewers, but they don't. Main grading is based on AI.
Wow.
So a grader will just kind of glance over it to make sure, from my understanding, a grader will kind of glance over the speaking and writing to make sure that the AI gave an appropriate score. But for the most part, it's almost all automatic. And that's why it's so cheap. Maybe you could tell me how much IELTS is, but TOEFL's $200, something like that.
I think it's about the same. IELTS, I think, is about £200 maybe in the UK. So what's Duolingo?
So Duolingo's $49. You can also take the test multiple times in a month. There's a lot of free vouchers. So, Duolingo philosophy is, education for all. So if you are from impoverished country or your income is a little low, then you can apply for a voucher and you could actually take the test for free.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So it's a very flexible and really student-centered test compared to TOEFL and IELTS, which is more based on linguistics and what educators like you and I might think is appropriate kind of measurements for if somebody's ready to go to university or take a job or whatever. Duolingo does do that as well, but they have a different philosophy of how to do that.
I think that's quite attractive, because when I'm preparing my students for the IELTS exam, very often they get to a point where I would score them quite high, but test nerves get in the way so much. The nerves behind performing in the moment with a stranger, and that stranger is an authoritarian kind of figure for them. It stresses people out, and you've only got a number of shots at it. Yeah, I just looked. It's about £190, £195. And I think you can only do it ever so often. How often can you do the TOEFL exam? Like, when's the next time you can do it?
That's a good question. I think you could do it more than once in a month, but okay. I think that's the limit. I'd have to double check. I think it's 2 weeks.
So really, the Duolingo way of doing it is eradicating all the nerves, because it's just your phone, right? Well,
you can't take it on the phone. You have to use a laptop or desktop. And there are quite a few secure. So one big thing about these tests is, are they secure or not? Can the school rely on the test score that they're getting? And so is it easy to cheat? So that's another thing that people criticize Duolingo for. The way that they,
gosh, you could cheat, couldn't you?
yeah, there are a bunch of security measures for Duolingo, like you can't look down for too long. If somebody walks in the room, your test is immediately canceled. The camera is using AI technology to track your eye movement. You can't take notes during Duolingo, so you can't look down at all. The way that they stay cheap is because it's almost taken from Creative Commons. They're not created by content creators. All the passages, the reading passages, are taken from Creative Commons, and so it's all generated from open sourced materials. Probably the only thing that they would actually write themselves might be a couple of the independent speaking writing questions, where it's like, do you agree or disagree all high school students should wear school uniforms? Probably somebody writes those. But besides that, as of right now, it's mostly all Creative Commons.
Right. That's really unique approach to it all. It's the future, I suppose. But I guess immediately my thought is, if you've got an identical twin, you could cheat. Could you?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I imagine so. I'm sure, people cheat on TOEFL and IELTS too. I mean, people, give ID cards to people and cheat. I mean, there was a big, massive cheating scandal in China for TOEFL a couple years ago, I remember. Really? So, yeah, I mean,
so
people
innocent.
cheat,
I don't even think about that.
Yeah, it's a big thing. It's a big thing that if you have a problem, an English test, and you're trying to solve it, and it's a very hard problem to solve, but you really want to achieve it, you'll find any way to do it. These tests act as a barrier for people who want to study in America or Canada or need a job in Europe or whatever. It is a big deal, for people, and sometimes if you get desperate, you'll try other things.
Yeah, right. What's your personal opinion of the Duolingo test? Do you think it's the future? Do you think it's just a momentary phase or a fad? Do you think it will stick around? So we're going to start teaching it in the next couple months and be making more videos about it and that kind of thing. There's not a lot of material. There's a little bit, but not a lot. In my opinion, it's going to stay around forever. Or not forever, but for a very long time, especially for universities and colleges in the States. And the reason is because they want students to come. They want international students to come and study. The TOEFL acts as a barrier for that. IELTS acts as a barrier for that. And lowering that barrier, some people might argue that, well, you're getting less quality English speakers, let's say, for example, or something like that. But a lot of schools have programs for English language. I worked at an ESL program at a college. And so some people think that it's a good enough diagnostic. It's a good enough test to see if they're ready to come. It hasn't picked up as much steam in Europe, the UK, and in other places. I think because people are a bit more. I mean, I don't really know why exactly. But are you meaning picking up steam as in schools accrediting people through the Duolingo test, that not as many universities are respecting it yet?
That's right. Yeah, not as many universities in Europe and the UK. It's definitely, I mean, in America, it's almost everybody now. In the Europe, not as much. So people have used IELTS forever and like the test, rely on it. There's a debate with anything new, like a new technology or new, like let's say Airbnb or Uber, it's the kind of similar complaints. Security's not as good. It's you can't rely on it. There's privacy issues. Things like that. It's similar complaints as you would have to any new technology or something like that. So this is education, so it's slightly different. Perhaps there will be backlash in the future, and people feel that this quality of the language that people can speak when they take the Duolingo is not as high, and then it does cause a backlash. But I think for the most part it won't. This test is very student-centered and also very almost culturalist, without much culture, if I can say it that way. And what I mean is that, so a TOEFL passage or a TOEFL lecture is like a university academic passage, university academic lecture. And sometimes they're structured. So let's say, for example, camouflage is a big one. So it's I've heard a camouflage passage on multiple TOEFL tests for some reason. It's an academic talk, and then they'll introduce the idea and then give two kind of examples of it to help illustrate it. They'll maybe give an animal that uses camouflage. They talk about chameleon, and then another animal that uses camouflage. Let's say tigers or whatever it is. You have to understand the structure of a university lecture. You have to understand, how it's structured and that kind of thing. I guess to give a better example would be for the speaking section, you have an independent question like, do you agree or disagree all high school students should wear school uniforms?
Yeah.
And you have to provide your opinion about that. Some people feel that's a very strange thing to ask, like my opinion on a topic that I'm not an expert in. I don't know if students should wear school uniforms. That's up to the school director or up to the parents. It's not really my place to have an opinion about that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Whereas,
a lot of the preparation that I have with my students is giving them ideas for their own opinions, because at the beginning they don't really have an opinion. They're like, I've never thought of that. I don't have an opinion. So we have to think of the pros and cons and then decide on what she or he believes in. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Whereas the Duolingo,
they do have that. So that they do have like a speaking, where you do have to give your opinion and that kind of thing. But it seems a little less, has a less weight, so to speak. So there's some speaking and writing where you have to describe a photo. They give you a photo and you have to speak about it and you have to write about it. So they give you something to describe instead of giving your opinion, which is a little bit different. It's a really hard test to prepare for because you kind of like either know it or you don't. Like how IELTS you kind of teach a lot of strategy.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain question type for the reading. When you listen, you should read the questions first and then, try to answer them while you're listening. The Duolingo questions are like, do you know it or you don't? And that's about the extent of it. You can learn some strategy for speaking and writing to improve your score, but especially for reading and listening questions, they're kind of like, you kind of know them or you don't.
That is really interesting. A new world of test preparation. I hadn't really thought about it too much that Duolingo was doing a new one. But yeah, if it's anything like Uber or Airbnb, maybe TOEFL and IELTS are dust.
I don't know. Like I think that they're definitely not dust, I would say. But, they have a reputation and a good reputation, TOEFL and IELTS. They're just not students.
So did taxi drivers. We respected taxi drivers before, and we still do, of course. Yeah. But the knowledge that they go through is questionable now, whether you need it.
So that's the thing. Is this does a IELTS test really mean that you're ready for school? Does a TOEFL test really mean that you're ready for school?
Yeah.
Does Duolingo test really mean that? So it opens up a lot of interesting questions that are kind of hard to answer. There's plenty of people who are good at taking tests that do test well, but then they go to the school and they have to take an English class before they can go to university classes. So, the IELTS and TOEFL have a good reputation, like taxi drivers. And, the people rely on them and know about them. I think that anything new is harder to catch on. Definitely think, at least for North American universities, they want to lower the barriers for people. And so Duolingo English Test, in my opinion, does a pretty good job of lowering the barriers. It's an easier test.
Okay.
We rudely interrupt your viewing experience because you absolutely have to get our brand new free ebook and audiobook that will help anyone dramatically improve their IELTS speaking score. Click the link in the top right corner of the screen now or find it in the description box below. Back to your viewing experience in 3, 2, 1.
Well, it sounds like that's good news for the learners. It might mean some things in the future, but for now, it makes sense to prepare people for either one and give them the choice, which is exactly what you're doing. That's fantastic. So should we give them an example of one or two of them and try to answer them?
Sure. Here we go. Describe a city you know about. What is it called? Where is it located? And what makes the city special?
And I've got to start speaking straight away.
So you'll have about, for Duolingo, I think it's 30 seconds, but let's do 15 seconds.
Well, I have 15 seconds to prepare in this fictitious situation. Can you say it one more time?
No. Okay, so begin speaking. Okay, so I'll do it one more time and then give you 15 seconds to prepare. So here we go.
So, if you wanted to listen to the full conversation, you can easily become a premium podcast member and get access to all parts of this conversation. And if you want to join a bunch of passionate learners and want to get a good grip on British culture in the most fun and effective way, then head over to thebritishenglishpodcast.com and join the Academy. Exactly. So I'll put everything in the show notes, but the best place to go, from my understanding, is your website, and the domain is tstprep.com. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, tstprep.com. It's mostly TOEFL stuff now. And then this is June, so probably around August or September, we'll have more Duolingo English test stuff. And visit the YouTube channel. I'm there, and I'm going to start doing more live lessons about TOEFL and Duolingo and general English because it sounds like fun. Yeah, so I'll be doing more of that
really
stuff.
Good. TST Prep YouTube channel as well. That's the same name.
Yeah, if you go to YouTube, say TST Prep, you'll find me.
Cool.
Somewhere.
Excellent.
You'll see a thumbnail of my face.
Your school or your online academy is for people to come on and do one-to-one lessons or an interactive software, or what's the way of learning with you?
It's a bit of both. It's courses and practice and teachers. So it depends on what the student needs. A lot of times the students who work with teachers need like you said before, they get really nervous with the TOEFL speaking and they can't get their speaking score or writing score. And so they need help with the teacher. And then the practice and courses are for just kind of general practice for people. We have the Score Builder program, which is for people who need to kind of improve their score with a lot of practice, short practice designed to help build skills. And then there's the emergency course, which is like, I have my test next week. I don't know what to do. And so
okay. Last minute.
Which which comes up pretty often. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, people come to me. I'm like, you need about 3 months, and they're like, it's tomorrow.
All right.
What are you doing?
Yeah, it's pretty common. We've gotten used to it. So that's why we made the emergency course, just like, everything you need to know in like 4 hours of videos and practice. Wow. That it's kind of just like short and sweet and to the point. And then if people need more, after the test, then we have other stuff for them.
Really good. Okay, so tstprep.com. But yeah, everything will be in the show notes. So go check Josh out and his online services. But yeah, Josh, that was amazing. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to doing this again one time.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. All the best. Bye.
All right. Take care.